Hi guys, welcome back.
What up, saucers?
So this episode is really for ourselves, and
Yes,
we hope
very
that
so.
it will, it'll benefit you as well. I think it benefits all of us. It's about setting boundaries. And that's a vague thing that's in our personal life, in our professional lives, in our romantic relationships, our families, our friendships. I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings around this and what it means and when it's necessary. And so we really wanted to do this to have this conversation, educate ourselves, it's a lot.
I know. This particular subject is deeply personal for a lot of people, and it's something that you don't really think about. And I've talked about this a lot this week with my own therapist, and then my friends too, because I don't know if you can relate to this, where you learned about boundaries later in life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. But it's so interesting, and it's not until you kind of start naming it and like what it is, do you start recognizing it in other people.
Yes.
And I'm still trying to figure out what that is, because I told a friend that I thought she had good boundaries this week, and she's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" No, I don't. And I'm
Really?
like, well, but it's all in the context of how everybody knows each other. And I say that too. Like, I remember joining a Zoom call with my two friends, and they were in the middle of talking about boundaries. Like, they were just talking about boundaries. And this is like last week. And I'm like, oh God, I don't think I'm good with those, as I'm learning in therapy. And they both said, "Alyssa, what do you mean? I think you're really good." One of them was like, I think you're very emotionally intelligent. And I'm like, oh,
But
wow.
that doesn't mean
No, I
you
know.
are.
And then one of them said, was like, well, that's in the context of how we know you, right? Because it's so different. You can have amazing boundaries with your friends and not with your partner. You can have amazing boundaries with your partner, but not at work. So like, there's so much, there's so many ways to communicate them, but naming them first and understanding what they are is really important to do. And I don't think it's talked about enough. The benefits to boundaries, and why putting yourself first in that way will only strengthen your relationships. Again, not only with others, but with yourself.
Yeah, because there's a thing, I never even heard that growing up, that I recall. I never even heard that term as like a normal.
Yeah.
The only context that I heard that in was once things had escalated in a situation just so bad, and someone's like, "Oh, you need boundaries." Like, that's once it's gotten extreme, like someone's in a fight or someone just like is walked all over, and that's when you hear the word boundaries. But so it's much like it's like being thirsty. You only are thirsty once your body's already dehydrated.
Exactly.
So if you feel thirst, it's too late. Like you're already dehydrated. That's why you're thirsty. But if you're hydrating yourself all day, you're never going to be thirsty. And that's kind of like what I have learned that it is with boundaries, where it's like, if you get to a point where you're like, oh, now it's a time for boundaries because this blew up in my face, it's too late. The reason it blew up in your face is because you didn't have boundaries. The reason you're thirsty is because you're already dehydrated. And so it's very similar to that, where I didn't grow up. I didn't learn about this. I didn't know. And then it's confusing because, like you said, in certain areas of life, I know myself to be very good. In certain areas of like, if I'd rather stay home tonight and be alone and not go to this thing, I'm good at saying no. I'm good at knowing I'm not going to make plans today or this weekend because I need time to myself, setting these boundaries. I'm really good at that. And I think I've made the mistake before at being like, that means I'm good at setting boundaries. But then in other situations, in work, for example, I've been like in situations where I'm like, why am I allowing this to happen? I thought I was good at setting boundaries, but I am not doing it right now. Or it is just a lot of different.
Yeah. And what I found so much with my, working with my therapist and also talking with people that have worked on their own boundaries for years, is that it does stem from when you're younger, like, I mean, all roads lead to home.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. And it's something that it's really interesting. Like, if you're not good with boundaries, it could be because you were raised in a household where boundaries meant selfishness, where boundaries meant, that you're
being inconsiderate of others.
Exactly. And not having a boundary meant love.
Yeah. Yes.
And that could does not mean in every part of your life growing up that boundaries are going to affect you relationship. It can mean it's going to pop up where you least expect it.
Exactly.
So yeah, we just want to encourage you guys to do that work yourselves because it has so many benefits.
And yeah, that's the thing. So personal boundaries can seem like something that only, well, like I said, that's only necessary once it's already happened, or once something already gets bad, but that's not the case. So the purpose of a healthy boundary is to protect and take good care of you. They're set to make sure that mentally and emotionally you are stable. And, you know, at various times in different situations, we have examples of rigid boundaries, loose boundaries, or non-existent boundaries whatsoever. And it's like the more we tune in and check in with ourselves, the more aware we'll be of this. A complete lack of boundaries may indicate that we don't have a strong identity, or that that our identity is enmeshed entirely with someone else.
Yeah.
And that's a prime example is like codependency or a relationship where you just put someone else ahead of you all the time. It's like really what's happening is you are losing your own identity.
Yeah.
And so boundaries can help people define their individuality and can help people indicate what they will and will not hold themselves responsible for. Boundaries create trust and build healthy relationships. Even when some people don't like what you do, they will likely still respect you for standing up for what you believe in. Boundaries also generate safety in relationships because when your privacy is respected, you're more likely to feel heard, validated, and appreciated. But most of all, you're not taken for granted by either your loved ones or colleagues or supervisors. And that's the thing. Like I have noticed when I'm not setting good boundaries, when I realize it, I'm realizing it's because mainly my fear is in how someone else is going to feel.
Right.
If they're going to interpret it as me being this, or are they going to think that that's where my fear comes from, I think.
For me, same thing, right? So like, I don't think I am good with them all the time because I always think, and you know, my therapist will say, you have a compassion for yourself. You have to have compassion for yourself. And I'm like, but I thought I am, right? Because this is my way of thinking, is that let's say this is, you know, this boundary would occur in the middle of a conversation, right? Maybe your friend is talking about something you don't want to talk about. I won't hold a boundary there because I feel like I understand what it's like to need to talk about something.
Yeah.
And I know what it's like to be shut down.
Yes.
So in my brain, I'm like, I'm being compassionate for myself because
you're giving someone what you didn't have.
Exactly. But then again, in the same turn, and it could be in the same friendship or not, it will happen where someone gives you a boundary, like, I don't want to talk about that right now. Let's save it for another time, which is valid. But I'm still working on that. I'm still working on, and it's not like I'll be like, no, and I'll like continue to do that. But that doesn't mean after I don't feel like shit.
Yeah.
I feel like, oh, but I really needed that person. And
exactly.
But there's the compassion, right? Because if you don't have compassion for yourself, you're not going to have compassion for the person that needed to hold that boundary in that moment. They weren't in the headspace for it. There's so many things that I can rationalize and say, well, that's why they put it up. But that doesn't mean your feelings afterward aren't going to make you feel less than or isolated or alone because you didn't have somebody you needed to share something so important. And that's so common and it's valid. And if you're working on boundaries in this front, you're going to run into that. You're going to run into these roadblocks where you essentially kind of make excuses to why, I don't know, to why you don't want to put them up and you want to be like, well, I know what it's like, but
that's the boundaries with loved ones are the ones that are the hardest, obviously, because you care about how they interpret your response. And because like that example you gave is basically you saying, I don't have capacity for this conversation right now. And me telling you this is because I acknowledge that this conversation needs my full attention and I want to give it to you because I love you. So it's really out of love because it's like, I can't give you what you need right now. And I know that what you need is really important. So I'm not going to phone it in. So I have to tell you that I can't do this right now, but it's easily interpreted. You don't want to hurt and you don't want to make that person feel like you just said, like, oh, I thought I could lean on you. I really need you right now. I can't talk about this next week. You know, like it's easy. It's really hard to set that hard line when you love people. It's easy to set a boundary when you don't care so much about someone.
Yeah. And it's hard to recognize when you need to set them if you're in the mindset that I am in, you know, when I'm working on it, because I will tell my therapist all day, be like, well, it's not that I didn't want to hear this conversation. It's fine. It's like, that wasn't that bad. I didn't need to hold a boundary there. You know what I mean? Because you don't really realize what you're capable of or what your cap is until you start doing that work. Until you start kind of, even if it bothers you a little bit, you got to listen to that.
Yeah.
And you got to learn from those that do it well. And at the end of the day, you might feel like shit. Let's say if someone gave you a boundary or someone, it's fine. Your feelings are valid. But the person that gave that boundary, most likely, more often than not, probably did the work and is feeling what they should, which is like, I did that for myself. I put myself first for that moment. And I can now hold space for the other things that take priority and then come back. So that means the onus is on you to do that work, not them. Like, you know what I mean? This is all about you. So basically, in an article on positivepsychology.com titled How to Set Healthy Boundaries, a few examples are given that feel very relatable. Most of us have failed at some point to implement boundaries in similar situations, like I was just saying. One example is a woman in the middle of the night packing up her house for a move might not let a friend who dropped in unannounced stay too long. That way she can get done what she needs to get done. And I feel like I've been that friend. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, how am I going to tell that person?
Yeah.
But yeah,
I know.
You might go crazy at the end of the night, which I have, you know what I mean? Where it's like, I wish but I wanted to be a good friend. And now I'm having intense anxiety because I just didn't get anything done. It's valid. It's fair. This is so complicated. Similarly, that woman might politely decline the same friend's request to help her pack if she thinks packing should be a personal process.
Yes.
Healthy boundaries are extremely crucial in romantic relationships as well. An example of this is a person asking their partner for one night each week alone, as opposed to seeing each other daily. Another example would be a new mother asking her partner to take on more responsibilities with their baby so that she can have more time to herself. Again, like we said, this could have been how you were raised or just how you view boundaries in general. To you in your brain, having a boundary means selfishness. Not having a boundary means love.
Yeah.
It's a very common thing to I don't know, to take on, to feel. And it's really hard to kind of deprogram that.
Yeah.
Because you might have been taught from people who were taught that themselves.
Yeah.
And didn't do the work.
And there's like a transitional ways to set boundaries where, like, when you're not fully comfortable, because we all know in theory, we should be able to just say, no, I can't, and leave it at that. That doesn't always feel the best. Also, there are situations, relationships, moments where you very well might owe that person a little more of an explanation. Not always, but like sometimes. So there's a thing where, you know, like saying, so this example that you just said, like a mom asking her partner, the dad, to, you know, take on more so that I could have more time for myself. So that is like a fully empowered boundary setting. And I know a lot of people feel the need to make an excuse, like, can you take the kids so that I can so I can clean the house, so that I can do this work? Because you still have to justify that you have stuff to do, and I'm still going to be doing things. I just can't be doing this. And it's like the need to justify versus just saying, I need time to myself.
Yeah.
But my point is that, like, ideally, yes, we could just be honest. We'll get to that point if we do this work, but it is okay to branch out, to start with that middle ground. If you need to say, you know, there's an event tonight and you really don't want to go just because you emotionally can't fathom socializing right now. If you need to say, you should just be able to say, I can't go, and leave it at that. But we've all been in the position where, and we're made to feel guilty for certain lies, where it's like, it's okay if it helps you and start your boundary setting journey. If you need to say, I can't go, this came up, I have an early morning tomorrow. If you feel the need to give some excuse still, it's better than nothing. Yeah. It is better than, you know, putting yourself through it, going there, being miserable, and not being enjoyable to anyone who's even around you. So, like, I think we need to ease up on ourselves. We can use our judgment for what lies are okay and what lies are not okay. But I think we need to ease up in the realm of like, it's okay to tell a white lie if it helps you set your boundary.
Yeah.
And just continue to work on getting to the point where you don't feel the need to do that.
Yeah. And I think another cool way to do that, and we'll get into like tips and too, but it is setting how I like a pre-boundary, like like in the one with the couples, right? Having one day a week to yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like if you have that day, if you like, it doesn't even have to be a white lie. You're like, I can't, that is just, my day with my partner, or I'm sorry, that's my day to myself.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking to coworkers, friends, whatever.
Yep.
And I think that's so good. And with Ryan and I, we just started talking about boundaries. Like that's how fucked, like it's like so bizarre. It's like, wait, am I good about, wait, are you good at boundaries? Wait, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're just like, oh shit. And we're like, you can think you're as healthy as anything in your relationship, but there's always needs for improvement.
Yeah. And there's always more to discover.
Yeah. And I feel like boundaries are one that aren't really, named or worked on that often. And that could mean so much to your own personal health, mental health.
Yeah.
And, would only strengthen your relationship in the long run. And setting, and whether you're clear about your boundaries, people will understand your limits and know what you are and aren't okay with, and they'll adjust their behavior. The people who don't respect your boundaries are ones who may not want you in your life. Healthy boundaries can also help you build greater self-esteem. And again, it's like people that don't respect your boundaries, like, this isn't me, okay? Like when I say I'm good at boundaries, you can still have me in your life, right? Because I'm not going to steamroll and make you listen to something that you don't want to do. Like,
Right.
obviously those people, get them out of your life. A partner, an abusive partner, get them out of your life.
Yes.
Except, but this is nuanced. And I feel like, with the friends that I talked about before, for example, I noticed that they have really good boundaries and they set really good boundaries for themselves. And I notice it happen in real time. Like they'll say something and I'll be like, oh, no, we got to keep going. And the other person will be like, absolutely. Yeah, I got it. Like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it that way. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching this and I'm like, what do you mean that's okay?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to, again, maybe I'll be passive aggressive. Not great. But it's just so interesting where it comes up. Because it's not all the time. Like there's so many. That's why they said that. And these are the people that told me that I have good boundaries. And it's like, wait. So it's just so interesting where your boundaries come up and why you choose to put them in different situations, because not everything is the same. Context matters.
Our reaction to someone that we love, respect, like setting a boundary can teach us a lot about where we still have work to do. Because if I like you just said, you watch someone in real time set a boundary and you'd be like, wow, that was so cool. That was so cool. And that reaction tells me that I'm not there yet, or I wouldn't be in awe of what they just did.
Right.
So it's like, I need to, and I am there. I know what you're talking about because I've had so many times like seen these things happen, or friends give me advice about things like, you just don't have to be dealing with this anymore. You should just, and I'm like, yeah, you're right.
But it makes sense why self-compassion is like the first step, I guess. It's like, in AA, it's like the first step is admitting you have a problem. The first step is admitting you don't have boundaries. I guess the second step is self-compassion.
Yeah.
It's just it's so wild. Setting healthy boundaries is a part of self-care and self-respect and should help to form the base of your own personal leadership. It is being assertive without the need for being aggressive. Healthy boundaries can help you define your uniqueness and your core. Saying no assertively to a new commitment means you are honoring your existing ones. Boundaries are not just about getting what you want. It's about getting to live your life on your own terms.
Yeah. And this is like, this past month for me has been very interesting. This is why I really wanted to even like have this conversation on the podcast, because I'm examining all of this in myself. But I have a lot of things up in the air right now for me personally that are transitional, that are not bringing me. It's not even negative. I'm excited about what's coming. I don't know what's coming, so it's like anxiety shifting, but I feel positive about it. All that said, it's still a lot going on that I'm trying to change and reset my course in certain areas, and that's just me personally. And then I have had in the last month, 1, 2, 3, 4 friends of mine, people that I love deeply that I'm really close to, not just acquaintances or like people that I know that our relationship is mutual. It's not someone that just takes and doesn't give. So I'm saying this because there are so many different shades of boundaries. So these are all people that have been there for me in my hardest times, that know me really well, that I love, that I care for deeply. And they don't know each other. So no one knows that I'm dealing with this from other people. And 4 friends in the last month, that's like 1 a week at least. And it's been multiple times from some of them. And it's like, call the kind of like, I pick up the phone. Oh, so-and-so's calling. Hi, tears. And it's like, oh my gosh. Like what? Oh my gosh. Like, okay, so I'm going to be there and I want to, that's the thing. Yeah. I want to, and I have capacity for you because you've done this is a healthy friendship. So that happens. It takes a lot. I go to work, I'm at work. I get a text, like paragraphs long text from a friend that's like, are you able to talk right now? And I'm actually not, I'm at work. And before I get that text, before I'm able to send that text, another one comes in that's like 4 paragraphs long that tells me what's going on. And then, with the acknowledgement, that was also like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I didn't wait for your response if you're at work. And I couldn't respond right away. And I waited a couple hours, but I was still at work when I responded because I'm like, this matters to me. And this is a really big thing. And I need to sit down. It took me maybe 5 or 10 minutes to craft my text response to that text. And so it's like, I can't just fire off a response and then get back to work. And yet at the same time, yeah. And that morning before I came to work, while I was getting ready for work, is when someone else called and hi, oh, they're crying. And then I get to work and then this happens. And then on top of that, there's like another friend that it's 4 people in the last month. And I have been feeling like, and then the basic things, and there's friends that are like, hey, do you want to like meet up today after work? Or how do you want to do this tonight? Or do you want to, before work, do you want to get coffee? And because I've been so giving in these really deep, serious, necessary ways to these close people, I don't even have the capacity. I'm like, yeah, I am doing nothing after work, but I can't speak to anyone. I have to go home and take a shower or maybe zone out or like take a bath. I mean,
yes,
just read, be in silence. I cannot commit to, I can't do anything else because I'm just giving and I'm going through a lot myself. And it's like in those moments, what do you...
I know. And it's recognizing, I think, because right? I feel like that you get that feeling once you pick up a call like that of whether or not you have the capacity for it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, if you're like us, or this is very human, is that you just stifle that.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you're just like, I'm just going to be here because it's like, I know what it's like to need to be heard.
Yeah.
However, if you do ignore that, because there's going to be times where you do have the capacity, you're like, oh my God. And you know what I mean? You pick up the call and it's total, and you got it and you move on and that's it. But you have that gut. And let's just say you don't understand what that gut feeling is. I think that's other work that you might have to do of unpacking and like, why trust yourself and stuff like that. But let's say you do recognize that gut and you're choosing to stifle that. You're not going to be the friend that you think you're going to be to that person. The advice that you might have given on a day that you had the capacity, like that advice might actually be the helpful one. And the one that you're giving now is just like, or you're listening, but you're half listening. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you get resentment.
Exactly. And you're going to be a better friend to them once you listen to them in the capacity in which you are capable. Because other than that, they just might be, which could be possible. They just want to vent.
Yeah.
But more often than not, if they're calling a loved one, they're going to want someone that's 100% there for them, listening, knows all the facts, and then could maybe give or not give their 2 cents at the end to help them.
Yeah. And I think like communicating with, like I said, in that example, that's 4 different people in my life, but they don't know each other. They don't know, for all they know, it's just them and me having these conversations this week. But I communicated with one of them. I told him like what was going on. And I'm like, there's been a bunch of people in my life that have been needing this. And he was one of them, and he knew that. And he took responsibility, not apologizing for leaning on me, because that's like what, but the way he worded it. So my point is like, it's okay to tell people that you're struggling with your boundaries right now. If they're one of the ones that's testing them, if you love them, it's okay to tell them like, I'm really overwhelmed right now because I want to be there for you with this. And this is also happening. And this is also happening. And I just have to explain why the next time you called, I didn't answer because I didn't know if you were going to be in tears and I couldn't do it in that moment. And it's not. And so I said that. And then he did say, he was like, you know what? I think you don't realize how, because you're a good friend and you give good advice, that a lot of your close people don't necessarily realize that they're leaning on you that much. And then they definitely don't know that, like, I have other friends doing that week at the same time. So I think it's also on us to communicate with others.
To add to that, right? Let's say you were talking to someone like me who's kind of like struggling and that might, with boundaries, and might have to feel at the end of that, like I could be that person and feel like, well, that sucked. I really needed her.
Yeah.
Right. And that is okay. Like you don't have to, let's say it's me in this conversation. You don't have to then ignore your best interest and ignore your boundary and then be like, all right, I'll listen because I know she's probably thinking this. That's not what you have to do, because at the end of the day, I am your loved one. Like I'm my friend. That person that you think you're hurting will love you enough to understand and have this conversation later. Let's say I was upset and I'm like, I want to bring it up later. Set that time to talk about this. Yeah. You're like, well, I really needed you. You're like, well, I needed, you know what I mean? And there's no way, if that person loves you, is not going to hear you and respect that. There is no way I would not hear that and respect that in the long run, even if my initial instinct is, that sucked. I needed her. Now I feel shut down, rejected, whatever the hell.
Yeah.
So don't get in your head about what they're going to feel, because that might not last, because at the end of the day, if they're, a healthy person, they're still going to be on your side and understand and be respectful.
Yeah. And like you said, even if, like in that example, say you do feel hurt, like, oh, I really needed her.
Yeah.
You might feel that, and that's okay, but then you will bring it up to me later.
Right.
And that's a good point. Like, you have to trust that person to be their own person enough to, like, tell me if you were hurt about it. Tell me when we actually can sit down and talk, and I'll tell you why I had to do that. And then it smooths over.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it can be.
Yeah.
100%.
So we're here?
Yeah.
Okay. So knowing what boundary invasions look like is also key to figuring out how to set healthy ones. And there's obvious ones, but then there's some sneaky boundary invasions that you don't realize are happening or that you're doing.
Yes.
Examples of emotional and intellectual boundary invasions are not knowing how to separate your feelings from your partner's and allowing his or her mood to dictate your level of happiness or sadness, aka codependency. That's a thing. That's a thing. Any in healthy relationships, when you love someone, when you live with someone, you come home from work, you're in a good mood. If they're in a bad mood, it is good. It's normal. You're going to feel it. The energy shift is going to rub off on you, but it's then dealt with in some way.
If it's never resolved or talked about and it's a reoccurring thing, that is something you need to.
Yeah. And if it doesn't just affect you in that moment, like I come home and last night I felt, but if it then bleeds into, like, it takes away your joy to your core, it affects who you can't separate your feelings from your partner's.
Yeah, exactly.
That's, so sacrificing your plans, dreams, and goals in order to please others. Yes. And that can be as big as your life's dream or as small as your brunch plans.
Yeah. Yes.
In anything. Not taking responsibility for yourself and blaming others for your problems.
Yes.
And I've heard this recently from someone in the form of, like, you regret a financial decision that you made. And then you say, I listened to everyone around me. I should have just listened to my gut. But you made the decision of what to do with your own money. So that is your decision.
Yeah. The easy route is most likely not the right route.
Yeah, exactly.
Essentially, like, it's going to be easy to blame everybody around you. If you know whatever your instinct is to lash out, like whatever that is, breathe on it. Like, take a day, because whatever that initial feeling is most likely the wrong one, because it's always more complicated than that.
Yeah, always. And what are some barriers to boundary setting? We did kind of touch on this, but it sounds logical and even easy to do. Like, this isn't healthy for me, I'm going to say no. But it's very common that we avoid doing what is best for ourselves in this area. And why is that? Why do we not enforce or uphold our boundaries? Usually it's fear of rejection and ultimately abandonment, or fear of confrontation. That's a very common one, or guilt, or we were not taught healthy boundaries. And then obviously there's safety concerns, and that's another conversation, but I just want to acknowledge that, like, if you're in a really abusive relationship, there are obvious reasons why you wouldn't feel like you can set boundaries, but that is separate. And so I just want to obviously acknowledge that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. So here are some tips for setting healthy boundaries that are modified from the book Boundaries Where You End and I Begin by Katherine. I love that title.
I know.
When you identify the need to set a boundary, do it clearly, calmly, firmly, respectfully, and in as a few words as possible. Do not justify, get angry, or apologize for the boundary you are setting. You are not responsible for the other person's reaction to the boundary you are setting. Again,
I need that to
as
sink
someone
in.
that like might have that initial reaction of just like, that sucks, I wasn't heard, because I'm still working on this. It is okay to ignore someone like me. It's okay. You know what I mean?
And it's not ignoring, it's more just like, let them feel that.
Yes.
And then you, like you said, circle back.
Yeah, because I don't think I've ever been given a boundary by someone that's good at them in not a respectful way. That doesn't mean I still don't feel like,
yeah,
because I'm still not, obviously, because I'm not good at giving them. So why would I understand it, no matter how well that it was presented to me?
Yeah.
That doesn't, and that is okay. If you love someone like me, it's okay. Still put yourself first.
You're the friend that was calling me crying that I
was
It's
close
her.
to this week. I mean, this month,
Yeah,
literally. So if it upsets them, know it is their problem. It is. Some people, especially those accustomed to controlling, abusing, or manipulating you, might test you. Plan on it, expect it, but remain firm. Remember, your behavior must match the boundaries you are setting.
Ooh.
That is important. So it's like, I mean, I won't test anybody, but I'm sure there are people that would and be like, well, fuck you, like whatever.
Yeah, or manipulate.
Or yes, exactly. If you're doing the work, you got to do it for yourself in a way where you're communicating in the most healthiest way possible. Do not stoop to the level of the person that's trying to hurt you, essentially.
And your actions matching the boundaries you're setting. Because I have been guilty of, I'll finally work up the courage to say to someone, this isn't working for me. I need more of this. I need this. And I'll say it and be like, whew, I got it out. And the next week I fall back into the old patterns of not demanding it for myself, not acting as though we didn't just have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so common that happens because it's hard. It's hard to actually implement things. And Alexa Cordry, who is on, she's amazing. Please go on our Instagram.
Yeah.
We'll share her story. She recently did a really good a video on this, on how to set boundaries. And what she says, I think either in the video or in the caption, that's amazing. It's setting the boundaries isn't the hardest part. It's enforcing them in the long run and making and sticking to them.
Yes.
Sticking to them in the long run. That's the hardest part.
That is the hardest part, because conversationally you can reach a boiling point where you just finally blurt out what you need, but then you need to continue to demand it.
Yep. So you cannot successfully establish a clear boundary if you send mixed messages by apologizing. Did I say you can't sexually establish?
Sexfully. You cannot sexfully establish a boundary.
But you should also do that as well.
Yeah, sexfully.
Yes.
So at first, you'll probably feel selfish, guilty, or embarrassed when you set a boundary. Do it anyway and remind yourself that you have a right to self-care. Setting boundaries takes practice and determination. That's the thing. I am trying to be patient with myself. And that's why I said, like, ease up on yourself if you can't do it fully and you need to tell a little white lie to get your boundary in. Have patience with yourself, because this is hard and it varies based on who you're talking to. So do it anyway. Yeah. Practice and determination. Don't let anxiety, fear, or guilt prevent you from taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
When you feel anger or resentment or find yourself whining or complaining, you probably need to set a boundary. That is a symbol, like literally when I've started to feel resentment before, where I'm like, well, it's not really on them. They're just sharing with me. And I haven't once told them that this is taking from me. Like, I'm starting to resent this person, but I haven't told them that they're shitting on me.
Yeah. So why am I, so it's not
their
right.
fault.
It's not fair to them. It's not fair to you.
Exactly. So listen to yourself, determine what you need to do or say, and then communicate assertively. Learning to set healthy boundaries takes time. It's a process. Set them in your own time frame, not when someone else tells you to. It's okay if you hear your friends telling you to set boundaries and you know they're right, but you're not quite there yet. Just continue to try to work yourself to the point, just don't bury it. and deny it. Just get yourself there in your own time. Develop a support system of people who respect your right to set boundaries. Eliminate toxic people from your life, those who want to manipulate, abuse, and control you. And that's way easier said than done.
Yes.
But it is easy to sit down and make a list of people in your life who feel toxic. You can start there.
Yep. And again, don't think that, everyone's working on, you could think that maybe, you've worked out healthy boundaries to an extent, but not realize that you're not holding the same standards for your boundaries in all of your relationships. So really take a moment to analyze the relationships you have with others, with yourself when it comes to setting boundaries, because they're not all treated the same.
And then you also can learn to recognize if you know that your own symptoms of, if I'm resentful, I'm angry, maybe it's time for me to set a boundary. It is not I will say it's not our job to interpret when someone else should be setting a boundary, but isn't. That's not what I mean. Like, it's your job. But I think if you are noticing a friend or a loved one or a boss or someone, you feel like they resent you or they're angry or something that feels unjustified, and you're like, where's this coming from? It could potentially be that they haven't set a boundary that they need to set.
Yes.
So I think there's like an awareness level of like respecting other people's boundaries, recognizing when someone is trying to set one with you. Because it's not always going to come in the same way. It's not always going to be someone being like, I can't talk to you right now. So.
Yeah, exactly. So we are going to link all of our articles in our show notes, especially Boundaries Where You End and I Begin. Another shout out for that book. And then our charity nonprofit today is Active Minds. Active Minds is the nation's premier nonprofit organization promoting mental health awareness and education for young adults. They're dedicated to saving lives and to building stronger families and communities through education, research, advocacy, and a focus on young adults ages 14 to 25. Active Minds is opening up the conversation about mental health and creating lasting change in the way mental health is talked about, cared for, and valued. What has guided and distinguished them from the start is a belief that young people will be the drivers of change. Active Minds is present in more than 800 schools, communities, and workplaces nationwide, including 550 student-led chapters. Their programs and services empower young adults to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health, create communities of support, and ultimately save lives. So to learn more and donate, please go to activeminds.org.
It's a really good one. We started this conversation by like, I don't know when you first heard about boundaries, but it wasn't in childhood.
No. I don't, like you said, it's that like, whoa, boundaries. It's like either joked about or like,
or it's to express like something extreme and dramatic.
Yeah. Not seriously talked about, and how to recognize them in yourself.
Yeah.
And literally just started talking about. We lightly talked about it in therapy the past year, but like just like heavily going into it because I'm now noticing, because it's being talked about, what it looks like in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy shit. If it's mind blowing to me, that's a problem.
Right.
And I really commend people that worked on that, because they either, doesn't mean that they were raised in a home that had very healthy established boundaries, but that they just did the work to do it later. And that's exactly what you should be doing. We all should be doing now. Like, don't just give up, if you weren't taught them at a young age. There's work to be done and you could be doing it.
There was a funny thing I want to tell you, because that friend that I told you I was talking about, where he was going through a lot, and then he acknowledged like, I'm sorry, like you're there for everyone. And so there was a period of time, because he's been going through something for a while. There was a period of time where he was texting a lot and calling, and I was not responding at all for like, I think like 3 days in a row. And he texted in the midst of all that, no response, missed calls, no response. And then there's a text that just says, boundaries? I was laughing so hard, like, oh, you're setting boundaries. Like, oh, I see. And it was hilarious.
They'll get there. They'll get there. We all will.
So yeah.
It's hard.
You guys can do it. We can do it. I believe in you. I believe in us. I'm trying to believe in myself.
Yeah, this is an ongoing work, and there's no shame in whatever boundaries game you have right now. Just recognize it and work on it, because again, it's going to help your relationships with your loved ones, your coworkers, your bosses, and yourself.
Yes. And I'm Molly Cottrell. We didn't do any of our other stuff.
Well, she is Molly Cottrell, and you can find her and me at our Instagram at the SOS
I just want to say I'm Molly Cottrell. Continue.
And I just want to say, I'm Alyssa, but that's over here, there.
Anyway,
and
my earring just fell off
you can
my
follow
ear.
us on YouTube. While we're falling apart in general. Follow us on YouTube, SOS Molly and Alyssa. Subscribe to us there, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Rate and review us. It helps us reach more people. And we're on Patreon. So
Yes,
become a patron and help us create more content. You'll get some goodies in return. It's great.
Yes, and I'm Molly Cottrell.
Wait, who are you again?
I'm sorry. I'm Alyssa Rosano.
I'm Molly Cottrell.
And here's the Turning Meltdowns.
No, and
here's the Turning Magic into meltdowns. Good. That was so good. Dude, we should do a reverse episode where we like a random